Hey everyone, welcome back to Berlin Noir. Today we are going to be finishing up the Luisenstadt Canal and its conversion into a sunken garden, and we'll also be working on the two nearby churches in the area, the St. Michael and the St. Thomas churches, as you can see here in the aerial view of the time. But so yeah, to start off, we are going to be beginning with the sunken garden here, and I'm not going to do a whole lot of it since the previous episode was mostly, I should say pretty much entirely, the other half of the sunken garden. So this area is a little different, its look and appearance, and so I decided to include, a tad bit of it, and starting off with this little segment here, which is right next to that pool to the right, the Engelbecken. And once again, I'm sticking to how it looks today, and that's just because what I've read is that they made a good effort to restore the garden to what it looked like back in the late 1920s when it was first converted to the sunken garden. So on this side, there's this staircase going down there on the left, and then just a simple path, I believe this is like 4 meters, but just a standard path, more or less. I'm using a vanilla one, I believe, part of the zoo paths from the Parks DLC. But it just goes down, and there's a lot of interesting vegetation and trees and such there. But before I forget, because I've been meaning to mention it in the previous episodes, but right now, as you can see, I'm placing the trees and such to the right, because if you might have noticed, it's pretty quick, so yeah, you probably didn't. But if you rewind or anything, you'll see that I can't place anything on any sort of networks, or I should say I can't place any trees on any networks, such as roads or this path here. And typically, that's because someone might not have prop and tree anarchy or have it turned on. As you can see there on the bottom left of my screen, I do have prop tree anarchy turned on, as I always have for the entirety of this series. It's one of the most basic mods that's been around for quite some time. But you definitely won't be able to see it because it's, like I said, it's really fast. You can see the red, but you can't see the text. And the text says you can't upgrade this type, which is really strange. I don't know why it thinks I'm trying to upgrade it or something. Like if you upgrade a road or something and then you try and upgrade that road again with the same type of road or something like that, it'll say you can't upgrade it because, it's already been changed. It's already been upgraded to the road that you're trying to change it to. So that's the exact same thing that's coming up, except of course now I'm trying to place trees on top of networks, and it's only trees. If it's a prop, I can place it on any network. If it's a tree prop, I can still place it on the network. So I don't really know why it's not letting me do it as trees. It's not the biggest deal, like you saw me just kind of placing things to the side and then having to drag it onto where I want if it's nearby a network. So yeah, not a huge deal, but if anyone experienced it themselves and found a solution or just things to try, whatever it may be, let me know, because ever since I came back to the series, I've been having that issue. So not really sure what happened in between that gap there, but whatever it is now, it's causing that issue. So yeah, definitely let me know if you by chance know what's wrong with it. But so anyways, moving on from that, that's all we're going to do as far as the kind of garden parts, and because there's still a big segment, because we're working on right now is kind of where it curves from where we were next to the Engelbecken and then up to the Spree River. There's a big curve, and that's all part of the sunken garden. Part of it I decided to do as a sunken garden, and then part of it I decided to do again as kind of like that transition period or transition zone, as I was doing in the previous episode, still showing some elements of stuff being under construction or filling in the canal still, that type of thing. So for this here, what I was doing is this is actually where a pedestrian bridge used to be that used to go over the canal, and now today there's also kind of a road slash pedestrian path. I imagine it was a road at some point, but it was converted to just a pedestrian path later on. So what I was thinking was essentially, I'm just thinking that at this time they removed that narrow pedestrian bridge that went over the canal, and then we're in this, they were at this time converting it and building up to that, I guess, car bridge slash pedestrian bridge. Again, I'm not sure what it was converted to first, but that's what I'm going for there. And I do revisit it to add some more details, but kind of, as per usual, just hopping around a bit, doing that there again with a wall there, kind of just a dam slash wall, so prevent any sort of water from leaking or anything like that. I did put some pretty big puddles there, just to kind of show some sort of leakage, perhaps. I'm not really sure. But then those supports up against the dam, just to support it, prevent it from caving in or anything like that. But yeah, so here we are back to it. I'm laying these little brick walls, just perhaps, this is the foundation, what they were laying before, filling it in with pavement or stone or whatever to build the actual bridge itself. And then what I decided to do here is these are vanilla little stones, little vanilla rocks. I don't know if they're in the base game. They might be a part of a DLC or something. But I wanted to make it look like they were building it. They were nearly finished with this part of the wall here, and as you see, it's just like that stone wall, so it matches really, really well. As you can see, the stones vary in sizes, so you have to spam it a lot to get the smaller size that you want. But I think it looks cool. It's a very small detail that almost no one's going to notice, from a distance. But it looks cool as it's looks as though it's being built there. And, I place some prop people working nearby, to give it that complete feel of being under construction. Here's just another little pile of the little rocks. I didn't really have the patience to spam 100 rocks and then go through each one to make sure they're only the small ones, since they tend to be the larger stones when you just place them down. So that's why that pile has some larger rocks. But yeah, it's not a big deal since it's a pile and it kind of all blends together anyways. So just this last bit here is adding some trees, and this particular tree here is going to be knocked over, since I imagine these trees would have to be removed, at least some of them, to make room for the construction and stuff. But yeah, so I really liked how this entire area came out. The sunken garden really looks good in the city and definitely ties this area together well. So now for the second part of the video, we are going to be working on the two churches that I mentioned at the start of the episode. And starting off, we have St. Michael's Church. This is a really nice picture here. You can see the angle back in the pond here with the fountains and all, and the church in the background. I really like that I found that one. It took me a while to find that picture because I was actually having some trouble finding photos around this time. And I was finding it hard to believe that there weren't going to be any pictures of the church, or at least, the church in the background, kind of like that photo. So, I think it's just a matter of living in, out of Germany, and it's difficult to find pictures and stuff that aren't from websites with American domains, or at least domains of stuff that is frequently visited, in the U.S. So I'm getting a little better at finding more photos. People help out as well, and yeah, because it's like I said, it could definitely be a little difficult finding photos at times, but it's always nice when I find a nice photo, such as one that was there a second ago. But anyways, so yeah, so this is again St. Michael's Church, and basically, the church fortunately was already on the workshop for a while now, as well as the other church for this episode, the St. Thomas one. So that's really nice, that both churches happen to already be on the website, or I should say the Steam workshop. Since really after these two churches, I think I can't remember. Obviously, it's Germany, so there's gonna be plenty of churches, and obviously I don't want to use the same ones over and over again, and I can only manipulate them so much with procedural objects. So in order to make the build look really well, it's pretty important to have the actual asset available. So that was definitely good, and definitely made me want to do both of these here and really finish this area and really pull it together. But yeah, so for the detailing around the church, as you see, I laid those paths down, which appear to be pretty much the same today as they were back then, at least in the late 1920s. So that's interesting to see. Very rarely do I see any sort of path layouts or anything like that that's similar to today as it was back then. And especially considering this church was hit during World War II by heavy bombing, and currently, in its current state, it's not really it's not a complete church. It's partially bombed out, and it's protected, of course, as a monument. I guess kind of similar to that the Kaiser Wilhelm Church, as it's also in its partially bombed out state. So that's how this one is today. But other than that, like I said, the paths to trees and all seem relatively similar. So makes things a little easier, and not as necessary to stare at the black and white aerial view photos for hours on end. It feels like just trying to figure out what the heck I'm looking at. That's always fun. But yeah, so for the decorations and stuff, I tried to keep it relatively neat, relatively simple, since from what I could tell on the aerial view, it was pretty simple, just kind of lines of trees, which we'll get to in a little bit. Not a whole lot of empty space in these green areas, just pretty much covered in trees. So makes it easy, I guess, just using the prop and tree line tool, whatever it's called, just to lay down the trees. But at the same time, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm sure many of you feel this way as well. But just when you lay down trees in lines like this and do it too much, it feels very much unrealistic. So I always try and avoid it, even though it's so simple. But when it comes to Berlin at this time, many areas were like this, since many of the areas weren't too old. Like this church here was built, I think, between 1851 and 61. So, relative to how old many things are in Europe, that's pretty new. So, yeah, many of the areas, are well maintained, the trees, the grass, all that type of thing. So, it's hard to get that balance of laying lines of trees like this and making it still look realistic enough. So I did experiment with a few different trees, at least especially for these here. You might have saw a second ago where there were some trees there that I deleted. I tried out a few different ones, trying to just get a look that felt right. I like these here just because they're very generic and they're pretty full. There's not a lot of empty space in them, so that they definitely fill in very well, and I like that. But yeah, just adding a simple little staircase there, some steps going up to the front door, since that's what I happened to see in a photo, and just a small little thing definitely finishes off the church quite nice. But so now we are moving on from that to what we're pretty much going to be the last part of the episode. And this is the Marianenplatz. I don't know why I couldn't say that. Let's go with that, Marianenplatz. But yeah, so this is right in front of the other church that we're going to be building, the St. Thomas Church. And it's just a kind of simple little open area with some trees lining the roads. and then some fountains, I believe. I do include a picture later, which you'll see. It's quite nice, the church in the background with the fountain in the front. But there are some interesting buildings around here, aside from, of course, just a church. We don't actually get to any of those, which really, for this episode and the previous episode, there's a lot of just empty areas around the build. And, it's kind of just the nature of building away from what I've been doing. This area of the city is mostly empty, and it's pretty time-consuming building that garden. So I didn't really have it in me to build a bunch of just kind of generic residential, commercial blocks, whatever, and kind of fill in the areas around it. And also partially because a lot of them have some more interesting things in the center, like a lot of industrial type stuff, maybe warehouses, businesses, those types of things, which I do want to take my time on that, since that's a little more unique, right? The center of blocks. I don't want to just fill in with trees and some simple props. I want to take my time on that type of stuff. But one thing that I do definitely want to build, not in the next episode, but in one of the upcoming episodes, is the hospital, which is straight to the left, kind of where that interesting little road peels out there, right there at the bottom of the screen. There is a hospital there, which the building still exists today, though it's no longer a hospital. It's like a art center, music center, or a school as well, I believe. But they kept the original building, and it's an interesting little thing. The building itself isn't too grand or fancy, and I think there's a building that I recently found that will work pretty well for the entrance, so that's why I'm kind of interested in building that, because I think I'll actually be able to replicate the front pretty well. But just kind of the areas around it, some gardens and stuff like that look nice, and just once again make me interested in building around this area, because there's so many unique things going on in the center of the blocks, as I already mentioned. So that's definitely why I like building in this particular area, and really any area in the city that's like that. It's just, it's pretty fun and breaks up some of the monotony that sometimes happens when you're just building generic blocks all the time. But anyways, so this is, again, working on the little garden, or I guess more plaza, in front of the church here. Just making it pretty simple, pretty neat, not too overgrown with anything. Just some large trees on the side, and then the bushes there. So lastly, to finish up the episode, we're going to be working on the St. Thomas Church, which is very quick. But here's a nice picture with the fountain there from the plaza that we just built. The church here was actually at one point, from the time it was built up until about 25-30 years later, the largest church in Berlin, which is interesting. Of course, later on, the Berliner Dome came along and completely blew it out of the water as far as size goes. But interesting knowing that this part of the town, this part of the city, actually had the largest church for a while in Berlin. So like I said, there's really not much here, just adding some simple trees and plants, flowers, stuff like that, since basically the church takes up most of the space in this little area here. So that's gonna do it for this episode. Next episode is going to be episode 45, and it is going to be a overview episode. I like doing that every 15 episodes, and that is going to be time for the next overview episode. So hopefully you're all excited for that, and I will see you all in that video.